Yes, yes. So first and foremost, I think I would like to mention that I'm excited and honored really to be here and join this webinar today. Um, I'm not one to believe that everyone has to touch the stove to know that you can get burned. But if we all are more open to sharing our experiences, ultimately we all grow, make less mistakes, and we end up with the right people in the right seats. And so extreme kudos and respect to IDC for creating this platform. I think, like most, my path to economic development was not planned by any means. To kind of give you a journey or a roadmap in terms of how this happened, ultimately, I graduated from Bucknell University with a degree in economics. And the plan there was to go to law school and do corporate law, but that didn't work out, as I ended up doing an internship with Jpmorgan Chase my junior year. And this was really my father's advice. I was playing football at Bucknell, and typically it's summer camp and they want you there, they want you present, but my father really encouraged me to prepare for the real world and ultimately get an internship. And so I did just that. If you did well within the internship, you earned potentially a full-time offer for what was called the corporate development program. And so going into my senior year, obviously I had hopes of continuing my football career, but if you know, Bucknell University is a small Division I school, and so not much access there, and so ultimately that didn't happen. I wasn't good enough, so we transitioned to taking the offer to work at Jpmorgan Chase, and so this was probably the most impactful, lessons learned experience throughout my entire career. And so this was a 2-year program. Every 6 to 9 months, you rotated into a new role with a new team in a new location. And the goal here was for the organization to create leaders within the organization by having them touch multiple lines of businesses and being able to understand the overall operations and be able to apply strategy and leadership thought at a young age. And so there were about 60 analysts in this program, competitive program. And so you would rotate. And in doing this, you ultimately had to pick your top 3 positions based off your interest. And then the manager directors, they picked their top 3 candidates. And so it was a matching process every 6 to 9 months. So you're constantly evaluated, and you're constantly having to come on board with a team and offer impact very quickly. And so I learned so much from that experience. I graduated from that program, and upon graduating from that program, I was put into a position as the Assistant Vice President of Global Business Development Services at a very young age, in which I was able to support, you guys might have remembered the financial crisis, and so the big banking crisis. And so I was able to support Jpmorgan Chase's first color rebranding initiative to kind of get customers back engaged and offer a splash of color to statements and things of that nature. And so I did that. And in doing that, I realized one thing ultimately is that I really wanted to be a part of a more purpose-driven organization. Not to say that they're not, but ultimately I wanted to have a greater impact on people, something that I can see more directly. And so I didn't start looking. However, at the same time I was thinking this, a headhunter engaged. And so my father at the time, I told him I was interested at transitioning and looking at a company at the time that was called Jobs Ohio. It's still called Jobs Ohio. So Jobs Ohio is a private nonprofit economic development organization operating on behalf of the state of Ohio to drive job creation, payroll, and capital investment. When they engaged me initially, I did not have interest. It was a fairly new organization. And so there was a lot of skepticism around it. And again, it was fairly new. And I told my father that, I'm interested because I probably have a better chance of meeting Jamie Dimon working for Jobs Ohio than I do at Chase. And my father looked at me and he goes, "It's probably the smartest thing you said in the last 5 years. Go for it." So, when we think about economic development, that's one of the main attractions is that, typically as a young professional, you're invited into some really special rooms with some really special people. And so I made the transition and ended up in economic development. And so I was with Jpmorgan Chase for about 5 years, and then I've now been in economic development for about 6 years. So I spent my time at Jobs Ohio. During my time at Jobs Ohio, I served as a project manager, senior project manager, director of project management, and then furthering on, I was also transitioned to a different role in which I was placed in the Cleveland area to help build up a program that would support Jobs Ohio's overall initiative. And so I was considered the director of project management of the Cleveland area as well. How I ended up in Cincinnati is interesting. While I was in Jobs Ohio, I was commuting quite a bit. So I was driving back and forth to Cleveland. I had a newborn child, my wife, personally, but my wife was not for it. And so ultimately there needed to be a change. And I don't know, maybe, the ears were burning, but I had a mutual interest in an organization called REDI Cincinnati, which is where I am today. They've always been best in class when it comes to economic development, their metrics, my overall involvement with the team, high energy, they operate at the speed of business. I really had a high interest. And so I engaged, and in that engagement, we ultimately decided that we were a good fit. Kim Lauterbach, my current CEO, was the VP of Project Management and Business Development. She stepped into the CEO seat to replace John Reeder. And then I backfilled her role for VP of Project Management. And then we've also added a VP of International and Domestic Business Development as well. And so what was once managed by one person, we now have built out the two functions with two VPs in that area. And so we are REDI Cincinnati. Brief overview. That is the Regional Economic Development Initiative. We are unique in that we cover a 16-county MSA. And so we are a tri-state region. The majority of our counties actually sit in northern Kentucky. We have 7 in northern Kentucky, 5 in southwestern Ohio, and another 4 in southeastern Indiana. And so, granted, it is unique. There may be challenges, but we use it as an advantage, and we add it into our value proposition on our ability to drive job creation, payroll, and capital investment. And so that's kind of how I landed in economic development. That's kind of my journey to getting here. And like I said, by all means, wasn't planned, like many of the people I'm sure on this call, which is why we're having the call, right? And so when I think about what I do currently, my responsibilities, pretty robust. Currently have about 7 employees on my team. Under my umbrella is project management, site selection and real estate, business retention and expansion, and also our talent services program. Really a phenomenal team. I'm honored, really to work with the dream team and support those guys. With that said, right, our organization, in resources, really is built into, again, secure new jobs, create new payroll, and capital investment. We can't do that without overall engagement with our business development team, our marketing team, our ops team, right? And so it's a full effort. In doing that, I think, my job is to drive best-in-class project management function through strategy, advisory, influence, and support, right? And so that's ultimately where I sit today. If I could probably take you through some of the tips and advisory that I've received, because I've received a lot on my leadership journey. Really, I want to talk through maybe some of the unspoken rules of engagement. I think the biggest lesson I've learned is about harnessing the power around you. And one of my early mentors brought this to my attention when he would hear me complain about meetings or happy hours or networking, et cetera. And so one of the first things we talked through was the power of presence. And this was mentioned earlier as well, but the one question I would ask, and I would probably address this in 2 ways. The one question that was posed to me was, do you know how you are perceived, right? And do you know how you want to be perceived? And are they the same, right? And if not, then why? And I know you've heard it before, but perception is reality. You have to, what I've learned is that you have to practice and prepare on how you would like to show up. I think oftentimes we have this feeling or a misunderstanding that great leaders have this organic thing about them where, they show up, and whether they prepared or not or did their due diligence, it's this aura that they let off. And what I've learned is that that's a mistake, right? The most common trait in most good leaders is preparedness and work ethic. And so I think the goal is to come off as if it's another casual day for you. but good leaders know who they want to become, how they want to be perceived, and they master it, right? And so I think it's a combination of self-awareness and hard work are some of the things that have been shared with me throughout my journey, and things that, you know, I've been able to leverage, I think, on this path to some degree. The other way I would speak to presence is by saying showing up. Like, I know it's easier to work from home. I get it. That's the path forward, right? But people want to see their leaders. And technology is advancing, but as much as you can, I'm a bit old school in that presence still leads to reliability for some, right? And as a young professional, sometimes the only capital you have is your time, right? Until you are able to make an impression on people. And so I often speak to this when I speak to young professionals, just in, you know, show up and show out as much as you possibly can, as I think it's still a requirement, even though, right, you know, technology is advancing and times are changing. That's just something that I've learned in my career, is that the more consistent, the more reliable I am, the more opportunities present themselves. The other thing I would mention is the power of meetings. And so I understand that every organization could be a bit more efficient about their meeting time, completely understand. But oftentimes I hear many young professionals complain about too many meetings and not being able to get work done, right? I think change your perspective a bit and understand that meetings are an opportunity really to show your value add, to sharpen your business case skills, to absorb and learn from those you admire, right? One of the techniques that I was taught, I went through an African-American Leadership Academy. It was a really intense program. And one of our coaches, he walked us through applying a balcony view, which again was a technique offered to me. But the thought behind a balcony view was that in every meeting or every room you walk in, you know, pull yourself up from the conversation and really understand the stakeholders and their value propositions in the room. And what it does is it prevents you from offering like self-served or selfish solutions, which allows for people to better hear you and understand and believe in your perspective. And so that's one thing that I've tried to apply. I'm working on it every single day, because sometimes it is challenging when you have an agenda. But, you know, again, just think about that when you walk into meeting rooms, on how you can add more value to those discussions and get more buy-in from the people in the room. And then the other thing I would mention is the meeting before the meeting, right? Like, build buy-in and build advocacy prior to getting in front of decision makers. It's an old trick that, again, it's one of those, you know, unspoken rules of engagement, but I think I've learned that that's a trick that a lot of leaders use. So by the time they get in front of decision makers, people that impact your career, your career trajectory, you know, they're already in alignment to some degree, right? And they're having the conversation real time, and they're going back and forth, but ultimately decisions have been made, right? And if you're not a part of those conversations, if you're not adding that to your technique, then you're at a disadvantage. And that's something that I've had to learn throughout my career as well. And then again, a similar topic around harnessing the power around you, the power of a business case. I've met some of the most intelligent young professionals responsible for really great work products. But where I've seen myself and others fall short is being able to go from analysis to presentation, right? And so the ability to concisely articulate a business case to leadership is an extremely valuable skill set. A method that a mentor offered to me was to know how your leadership is incentivized and build your pitch around impacting their bottom line. Use that as your home base for building your business case. And so if you take the power of presence, the power of meetings, the power of business case, I think you can see some synergies there in how determining you want to show up and how do you dictate the value add that you offer in engagements with members of your industry, essentially. The one thing I also want to talk about is networking. So I find this very interesting, right? I have a different perspective than some. So I'll start off with like mentorship. So when I think of mentorship, I apply a less reactive approach and a more proactive approach. We all want to believe that we're special enough for our CEO to walk in the room, tap us on the shoulder and say, "You're the one. You know what? I'm going to take you under my wing. I'm going to show you the ropes. and we're going to grow this company together. But quite frankly, I think we can all, understand that mentorship doesn't quite work that way. And so the old school philosophy is that you build a relationship, and through that relationship, organically, it forms itself into a mentorship. And so I just think, you go for what you want, right? And so if you can identify someone who you think has great leadership thought, and someone who has great presence, and someone you can learn from, reach out to them and ask. The worst they can say is no. And some say that this is a bit aggressive, or will it jeopardize the relationship? And I don't believe so, and I haven't had it happen to me in my career. And in fact, you'd be surprised at how many people want to dive into mentorship and gain a mentee, mentee, because they're looking to find a purpose in what they're doing and the work that they're doing. And so oftentimes people are very much excited to join in and actually help and be a mentor. So again, for me, when it comes to building your network, especially when it comes to mentorships, I recommend you go get it. The other thing I would also mention is for intentional networking. I know it's hard when you're a young professional to determine what to go to and when to go to it, right? How do you prioritize what events you should do and events you shouldn't do? And to go to everything can be a bit exhausting, especially if you're not an extrovert, right? And so when you think about that, I would ask that maybe you identify people in your industries that you want to engage with. You follow their social media feeds. Some of you would call it stalking, but I think it's working smarter and not harder. Go where they are. You can't go to every happy hour all the time. So develop a strategy and a cadence and be more intentional about the networking that you're doing. I think it would be easier to manage. You'll have a bit more control, and you'll probably see better results as well. And then two more things I'll mention on network: building a personal board. So I've worked extremely hard to kind of connect with great leaders and build, similar to a board meeting, a quarterly cadence to surround myself with leadership thought. And I don't get to meet with all of them, but even if I get to meet with one of the individuals on my personal board, oftentimes they offer me advice, experience and wisdom beyond my years. And it allows me to feel more motivated and able to go into a situation where I can actually influence my team through strategy and not direct support. And so it's, again, I would just say focus on building a personal board, be intentional in that effort. And then lastly, network horizontally, not always vertically. And so oftentimes leaders have already built their trusted network and circle. But it's only a matter of time before one of the young professionals on this call and one of your friends or one of your peers lands a leadership position. And so, oftentimes we don't really consider this in our overall planning when it comes to networking. And we're always interested in meeting the next big wig that we can. And granted, that may be okay. Just understand that to some degree, they may have the trusted the circles in place. And again, you're probably 1 degree away, or one friend away, or one peer away from someone who's going to get the next opportunity, and knowing them therefore presents opportunity for you as well. And so that would be my advice there. In terms of challenges that I've experienced as a young professional, finding my voice in high pressure situations, right? So again, in economic development, we have the advantage, and we are privileged to be invited into rooms where, you're talking to C-suites and you're talking to leadership, and you're a young professional, and oftentimes trying to find your value add in a discussion can be hard. And so one of the things that was coached to me was to kind of look at your role and build, simplify it and build trigger words, via an acronym or whatever works best for you, that when you hear those words, you go, right? And so, for our instance, for project management, right, I built something called like the 5 Ps, where like, what are the top things in which we should be subject matter experts on? And it's property, people, programming. And you just go down the list, just consider it that way, right? And as you go down that list, when you hear those words in your meeting, go, attack, right? That's when you should show your superpower. And I think it helps me to be better controlled, so I don't overthink it or overtalk or undertalk, or that I I am speaking to what I should speak to. And it's just one way that I do that. The other thing I would mention is, it was mentioned earlier as well, confidence. Behind that door are all humans, right? I guess I used to think, and maybe some of you as well, I used to think that, behind that door are just these extraordinary, alien individuals with these, superpowers. But what I realized is that they probably are more prepared, prior proper planning, right? I think they are probably more prepared. They have a great breadth of knowledge, and they're able to connect dots. But ultimately, right, they're no different than you. And I think we don't see maybe their mistakes as much, but they're making mistakes and they're learning as they go as well. And you'll be surprised at what you know that they don't know. And it's about being able to articulate that in a way that they can respect and understand it, so that your voice is heard. But ultimately, my confidence used to be shook and until I started getting into the rooms and started realizing that I'm only one lesson away, or I'm only one educational resource away, or one long night, grinding the midnight oil away from being able to speak intelligently about what it is that room is speaking to. And so I guess I would give that note to anyone, just to know that, they're no different than you, and, you have a superpower as well. And the last thing I would mention here is just that one thing I wish I've known earlier in my career would be, what's the price of being right, right? So oftentimes as young professionals, I think we are so focused on being heard, on proving our point, on getting credit, that we forget the dynamics of an organization. We can be blinded by our ambition. And this was me very, very early in my career. I remember we would have team meetings, and I would, be quick to pull the, "Oh, I got you," working so hard to ask the hardest question in the room, or correct someone if they were rounding versus giving exact. I would get invited to meetings because of my work product, but I would sometimes pull the rug from under my leadership, right? I think this is the fastest way to not get promoted, right? People start to lose trust in you, and you actually end up getting invited to less meetings and losing opportunity. And so I would say the next time, before you're in a hurry to correct someone or ask the most difficult question in the room, think about the impact. Will this make or break this conversation? Could I correct them after the meeting? Just remember, every decision has a cost, even being right? And so what's that cost? Relationships are important, sometimes more important than being right or wrong. And so how will it impact that relationship? And so, those are some of the things that I've learned throughout my career. I don't know it all, but what I do know, I share. And again, I struggle every single day with many dynamics on how to have a voice and how to show my superpower, right? And again, these are just lessons learned from landmines that I've stepped on, and different explosions in different places. But I'm here today to tell you all about it, in hopes that I can somehow offer some support and guidance to you guys, and serve as a resource going forward.